CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
Two men have been arrested and charged, and there's a third thug still at large after a group of skateboarders smashed the windows of an SUV and threatened the people inside. The assault happened Friday night in downtown Victoria. A Langford couple and a friend were heading home in their SUV after going out for dinner when the driver honked at three skateboarders who were walking down the middle of the road. This was near the intersection of Fort and Douglas. The skateboarders retaliated, throwing a skateboard at the vehicle's windshield, then smashing out the rear window. Two men were later arrested and are facing mischief charges. Police are still looking for the third. Whether the sun gets it or not, a sure sign that fall is here and is not just around the corners when the leaves start to change color and Victoria's hanging baskets start to come down, and they are disappearing today. City crews were out in full force downtown today, taking down the first of the more than 1,400 overflowing hanging flower baskets that are still doing very well. The colorful arrangements were collected, then sent to the compost facility in Beacon Hill Park. The city says the decomposed flowers will be used as part of the soil mix for next year's planters, but before they can compost, they have to take a few steps.
There's quite a lot of hardware that's associated with it, from the hangers to the baskets to some of the metal rims that are inside the baskets and the watering baskets underneath. So they all have to be taken apart very carefully so we don't damage everything. Then they get dumped in a pile, and our compost technician comes with his loader and scoops them up and puts them in a pile so they can be composted.
Seems a shame when they still look so good, but they have to stay on schedule. The city's staff is already working on this year's Christmas poinsettias. Well, the labor unrest at the University of Victoria is heating up, and students are now beginning to feel it on campus. CUPE members set up pickets outside the university bookstore, the Affinity Express coffee shop, and at the residents' housekeeping offices today. Non-union staff members kept some of those services going, but the bookstore shut down, so students were unable to buy textbooks or any other supplies they needed today. The union says it's not trying to hurt the students, but the university needs to know that the striking workers mean business.
These are the first times that we've actually set up at locations which have some moderate impact on students. It's to raise the pressure on the administration right now. The bookstore is down for the day. There's no revenue coming in the door for the bookstore or the computer shop. The Affinity Express is a big revenue generator as far as the coffee shop. And residents housing, the housekeepers will not be cleaning up after the students from this weekend's parties and everything else that's been going on.
Bargaining between CUPE and UVic is set to resume tomorrow. And the labour strife does not end on the UVic campus. Tomorrow, the BCGEU begins a ban on overtime, and workers at ICBC claim centres across the province will walk off their jobs. Some encouraging labour news tonight for people in Burns Lake in the interior of the province. They are going to get a new sawmill. The owners of the mill, destroyed by a deadly explosion and fire in January, say they will rebuild what was the community's largest employer. Hampton Affiliates says the reopening of the Babine Forest Products mill is contingent on working out the company's timber supply needs in that central part of the province. Well, 1 year after the massive encampment that took over the heart of downtown Victoria, the Occupy movement is marked with a fellow protester's arrest. It was at this time last year that dozens of tents filled Centennial Square with hundreds of protesters, and it took the city months to eventually remove them. Today, the leader of the Right to Sleep movement, David Johnston, returned to the area to mark Occupy Victoria's 1 year anniversary. He was arrested shortly after for violating his court order that say he stay away from the square after putting up a tent there last year. Johnston says he's prepared for more jail time, but he doesn't want any more rights stripped away from him.
There's nowhere where it's free to sleep in the Commonwealth, and that must stop.
It's an ongoing situation. Is it frustrating for officers? I would say so, that they don't want to be in the position where they continue to have to deal with this individual. I think their time would be better served elsewhere, and I'm sure his as well.
David Johnston remains in police custody tonight. Vic PD says more than 100 people have been arrested as the Occupy police elsewhere, that is, say that about 100 arrests have been made as the Occupy Wall Street protesters marched in small groups around the financial district to mark the anniversary of the launch of the grassroots movement. An East Coast couple has finally arrived on Vancouver Island after trekking thousands of kilometres across Canada on a tractor in the hope of shedding light on the challenges faced on the Canadian farm today. John Varty and Molly Daly have spent the last 6 months traveling by tractor, pulling a mobile home at 25 kilometres an hour in support of the Canadian farmer. The couple is documenting everything they see while staying with local farmers along the way, learning about the problems they face on a daily basis. The pair says a lot of farmers are worried about the economy right now because it threatens our food supply.
I hope that a lot of Canadians, especially urban Canadians, can kind of go through the same learning process that I did on this trip and learn more about where their food comes from and how hard farmers are working in their own country to make their food cheap and safe and available and plentiful.
Well, it's nothing new for us. I mean, he's preaching to the converted. Farming and agriculture has had a real dip in the recent years, and it really is a time of crisis. So, I mean, the more that we can do to bring focus on it, the better, because farmers need help, and that's no joke.
The couple says their journey's far from over, though. They still plan on advocating for farmers while trying to make it more financially feasible for those who are trying to live off the land. Convicted killer Robert Latimer will be allowed an exemption to his parole conditions to travel to Europe. In an unusual case, he'll be a guest speaker at an educational conference. Latimer was convicted of killing his severely disabled daughter in 1997 and currently is on full parole. He asked the National Parole Board to let him leave the country, and the board has now approved his request. The Saskatchewan farmer will speak at an educational conference in the United Kingdom. Members of Parliament got back to business in Ottawa today after their summer vacation, and the opposition parties were quick to go after the Harper government over high jobless figures and ongoing weakness in the economy. The first day back in the House of Commons, and the NDP is already warning about another recession while asking the Conservatives why nearly 1.5 million Canadians are still without work. Prime Minister Stephen Harper fired back, accusing the NDP of reckless policies to block trade deals and tax hikes. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation took its concerns to Parliament Hill as well, or over it, urging MPs to rein in their rich pensions. The BC Liberal Party will not be changing its name before the next election. A 3-member committee says there's not enough time to rebrand the party before next spring. The Liberals say, however, that they are still interested in talking about it. They will revisit the name change issue after the May vote. Well, firefighters in the Comox Valley are pointing the finger at a group of partying teenagers. After fighting a quickly spreading wildfire, the crews responded near Highland Secondary School with reports of a smoldering fire. When they got there, flames were spotted coming from a forested area that could not be reached by vehicle or by hoses. Firefighters had to form an old-fashioned bucket brigade to attack the flames.
Quite a big concern for us. Very disappointed that people would choose to have a fire in this beautiful forest here this time of year. Any time of the year, by the way, but certainly this time of year we haven't had rain for 60 days here. So, and certainly a big concern of ours. This is going to be a struggle for us to put this out, even though it's only smoldering. This is not the first time we've been in here. We've been in here several times in the last 6 weeks or so, almost the exact same spot. So.
If you know anything about this fire or who caused it, you're asked to contact Comox Valley RCMP. The nursing program at Vancouver Island University has been given a 6-figure boost from a familiar face. Local philanthropist Sydney Sharman has donated $350,000 to build a state-of-the-art nursing simulation lab on the VIU Nanaimo campus. Sharman's donation will be combined with funding from Windsor Plywood to complete the project. That nursing lab will contain 3 simulated hospital rooms where students can get the best training possible before entering the actual workforce. The nursing students will also practice on new simulation dolls that have come a long way from the days of the motionless mannequins.
These simulation dolls have software that allows the dolls to reenact the kinds of symptoms that you might have for childbirth, a heart attack, pancreatitis, any kind of medical condition that you would want, but can be programmed.
Sydney Sharman is VIU's largest private donor, having already donated $1 million to the nursing program in 2009. Some growing concerns in the town of Qualicum Beach tonight over new height restrictions in the community. The town has removed the maximum building height restriction in the village after council voted in favor of building up. The goal is to attract new homeowners and businesses while optimizing space. New developments will now be allowed to build over 3 stories without seeking a zoning amendment. The mayor says many people are hesitant about the new rules and they fear it will change their town's character.
Well, first of all, we know what we have, and it's very attractive. I think we have, as Qualicum Beach, one of the most attractive commercial cores that you can imagine for a small town to have. So to change that for something we don't know is a concern. But we also have seen what removing height restrictions has done in other communities, where you see not just maybe 4 stories, but 5, 6, or even more stories than that in fairly small communities like ours. And people don't like that idea.
Council says it will also consider allowing residential units on ground floor levels, and development costs have been reduced for developers who are targeting green building standards.